We've just had a discussion about the future of the euro. You often hear the view that the euro, as it's constructed, is a flawed currency. You hear it from Eurosceptics who say it could never work, it was a mistake to begin with, it would be better to take it apart. You also hear it from the friends of European integration who say, yes, it was flawed, that's why we need to fix it with even more union, fiscal union and political union. In my book, Europe's Orphan, I agree that this premise, that the euro was flawed as originally constructed, is wrong. I don't think that there's a problem with the euro itself. There was a problem with the policy choices that were made by policymakers in the eurozone, and there were alternatives to those policies. The most important choice was to forswear the writing down of excessive debts at the beginning of the crisis. Instead of writing down Greece's sovereign debt in May 2010, the eurozone chose to bail Athens out. Instead of writing down the debts of Irish banks, private banks, in late 2010, there was a decision to bail them out at the hands of the Irish government and to bail out the Irish government by the rest of the eurozone. All of this could have taken a different course. One could have opted for a restructuring of the debts, both sovereign debts and banking debts. I argue in the book that this could have avoided other economic policy mistakes, such as excessive austerity, excessively tight monetary policy, and improved the banking system. It would have made for a better economic outcome, and it would also have avoided the poisoning of European politics, which turned debtors and creditors, a conflict between debtors and creditors, into a conflict between nations. In the discussion, there were, of course, disagreements and objections. One disagreement was that it would have been too dangerous to restructure debts early on because it would have led to contagion, and in particular could have taken down a lot more banks than just the few ones that were most directly at stake. Now, it is true that a wide-ranging contagion throughout the banking system could have caused a lot of banks to fail. But I think we need to take two things into account. One is that there's a difference between the failure of a banking system and the failure of individual banks. And sometimes keeping the banking system functioning requires the failure or the restructuring of individual bad banking entities. The other point to make and retort is that we need to compare like with like. It's not a question of whether a wave of restructuring would be costly, it probably would, but would it be costlier than what has actually transpired in the eurozone, which is a second recession, huge falls in output for many of the crisis countries from which they still haven't recovered. Another question is, if this is right, what do we do now? Can we get towards a policy that is more restructuring friendly? And is that an alternative to more fiscal and political integration, more permanent bailouts, if you like? It is difficult. We've gone down a long way on the bailout track, and we need to retrace our steps a little bit. But some of that has happened. We've moved from bailout to bail-in on sovereigns. Greece did have a sovereign restructuring in 2012. And on banks, starting in Cyprus in 2013, and it's now European policy that banks need to be restructured before there's any further taxpayer bailout. So I think there is reason to be optimistic about the future of the euro. If it's not a structural flaw of the currency, but rather avoidable policy mistakes that caused the long stagnation, then the euro is not doomed to failure, and that itself is a good thing.